As hybrid learning has started becoming familiar to many U.S. teachers and students, complexities involving ethical uses of technology and data have suddenly migrated to the classroom. Under this context, we pose as a team of district technology coordinators who are conducting a professional development workshop for high school employees. Our topic is an ethical dilemma, very characteristic of this picture and the 21st century.
We live in an era in which our digital selves are fully integrated into our daily lives. While we are advancing technologically at a breakneck speed, we have not succeeded addressing the negative implications that this progress might bring, especially on our youth. So young people are constantly exposed to privacy, security, and confidentiality concerns that intrude across the boundaries of their most intimate zones, overexposing them to the potential dangers of cyberbullying, predatory business practices, and misinformation. So the concern here then is how to protect them from the negative effects of such exposure and how to train our proxy guardians at school to safeguard them not only from being harmed and harming themselves, but also from overprotection that can lead to equally detrimental consequences. Thus, the question becomes one of the extent to which we are willing to trade student privacy for their well-being. This generative topic can prove meaningful for both students and teachers, as the prevalence of technology has forced us to evaluate the trade-offs between being protected versus being overprotected. So when it comes to multiple domains and entry points, the propagation of educational technology in a hybrid learning landscape has led to an urgent call for the protection of minors who are exposed to privacy, ethical, and security concerns while at school. The use of technology to counter this is related to the proactive monitoring of student activities, both online and through data collection, aiming to promote student well-being through appropriate interventions. So this requires multiple domains and entry points, from privacy and legal considerations such as student-child laws, and policies as related to how they define privacy, the legal liabilities of teachers and parental concern or consent, and the parent's role in all of this. Ethical consideration involve cautiously asking questions about whether teachers can clearly identify content that represents serious problems such as cyberbullying, hate speech, and the risk of self-harm. Whether they can articulate when it's important to act versus when it's important to do nothing. And what is our situation with regard to exceptions under the existing laws? Inquiries within the scope of these domains, some of the critical questions that we should ask are: when do my legal and professional obligations clash with the ethics of protecting my students? What are situational and demographic variables that might affect this question? How much data am I able versus willing to give in order to promote students' well-being? And how much data am I able versus willing to give in order to promote my own well-being? Such inquiries within the scope of the privacy, legal, ethical, and data domains must be addressed for us to proceed in defining the appropriate learning goals. So, learning goals. The learning goal here is to encourage high school teachers to articulate how privacy, legal, and ethical boundaries justify and or limit their ability to act upon their students and their online activities. To do this, we need to conduct multiple cases of different difficulty levels of understanding to address the limits or the limitations of worked examples. The most successful methods of teaching problem solving, according to Jonathan, is to support student construction of problem schemas. Now, for this, it is the quality of learners' conceptual models that most influences the ease and accuracy with which problems can be solved. So by addressing these issues from multiple angles across many different case-based scenarios, we can help high school teachers improve understanding to perform their duties. Also, given that our audience is a group of high school teachers, it is very important to explain how their support for the goal will help students solve future problems in a meaningful and flexible way. We hope that the high school teachers will become better informed in their decision making when it comes to intervention or intervening in the lives of their students. Understanding goals. Teachers should not only have the knowledge of the responsibilities of federal, state, and district level agencies, but also be aware of how each agency's functions lead to cascading effect on their ultimate role as teachers when dealing with the policies around online privacy, so that they can learn to handle data safely and securely, especially when it comes to instructional technology tools, communicate with other school officials if there is a need for intervention, and to learn to find balance among the demands of privacy law, ethics, and security in school settings. We must teach teachers to enable students to develop their digital citizenship by first empowering the teachers to recognize students' rights, responsibilities, and learning opportunities in an interconnected online digital world. While doing this, we need to help teachers perform the task in a safe and suitable manner. Once teachers are aware of all the aforementioned legal and ethical ramifications, they must be equipped to help students manage their personal data, for it is very important not only to protect their digital privacy and security, but also make them aware of a long-term data collection that might impact their overall well-being while in school and beyond.
As Ryan mentioned, the key to performance within our problem-based learning environment involves using a rich variety of problems as worked examples. Luckily, an abundance of such story problems about the privacy and ethics of student data are available online from organizations like the FERPA Sherpa. Well-structured story problems do have their drawbacks, sometimes in the form of poor design. Take the following instance with Ms. Wang. Here we don't even know whether survey data is being collected using technology. This lack of relevant information could compel learners with deficient schemas to overly generalize or rely heavily on their own misleading analogs and experiences. To sharpen the problem conceptually, we would include specific story elements relevant to the domains of privacy, ethics, and technology. These elements subsequently enable the learner to identify their relationships with another and the domains. To sharpen and test for the learner's schematization of these domains, we would then provide more problems of increasing complexity and less structure. The most ill-structured problems might be case studies. Here we have learners compare such scenarios with the prior problems or employ case-based reasoning to relate the problem to a similar experience in their lives. Their short answer responses can demonstrate their understanding of problem structure common in these domains, given the use of keywords and concepts and why they make the problem so difficult to address. For the final ill-structured scenario, we were inspired by the promising work of the Digital Pass program, a scenario management module developed at the State University of Canton that gamifies the dilemmas between student privacy and collected school data. Digital Pass is built with languages like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that allow for user interactivity on the web. Users' decisions and outcomes are logged locally, so the data can be collected within the organization. This in itself is a best practice that should be emphasized for all learners to take example of. Finally, a flexible editing interface allows both teachers and learners to inject their own variables to test in the game. In our proposed simulation, we divide learners into two teams. The first team scores points using and acting upon data tracking tools for their intended purposes, such as preventing disruptions in school or protecting students outside of school under life-threatening circumstances. Another team extracts exposed data, sabotaging unaware users or selling the sensitive information of children. Possible variables to alter outcomes and point scoring include the child's medical records. For example, if a student carries a history of mental and behavioral disorders and one day constantly posts disturbing language about self-harm, does Team A score or lose points for intervening outside of school hours? That might depend on variables, such as the select state and its privacy laws, or whether important settings of the monitoring system were turned on or off at the event time. Ideally, a sequence of outcomes would start with learners answering the story problems individually, without being shown the correct or incorrect answers. They then spend time on the game simulator, where they're given an event log of the choices they made and the points they earned or lost. Learners are then assigned into small groups for collaborative reflection. Those who performed well on the story problems with correct answers would pair up with those who underperformed and explain their results with prompts. All small groups can then try the game simulator again, manipulating variables they find interesting based on what they learned.
After students go through the previous learning modules and individual assessments, they will first be asked to gather into small groups to identify the pros and cons of schools having access to students' social media. They will then be asked to consider and reflect on what level of privacy and with whom is important to them and their students under various circumstances. Finally, They'll be asked to explain their rationales behind the decisions they made in the game and reflect on whether there were anything they could have done differently or what would have led to a better outcome in both legal and personal ways. By gathering in a group to share their thoughts with one another, they are able to gain deeper insights into different perspectives. In addition, their thought exchange process may spark different views that can open up further discussion revolving around the ill-structured problem of privacy and ethics. This collaborative and constructive process can help students develop better understanding of the different domains that are involved in the simulation. The variety of activities that the students are engaged in throughout this learning experience require a range of assessment outcomes. The story problem probes into students' level of familiarity with the key legal and ethical boundaries involved in different scenarios by taking context into consideration. It also tests whether they are able to discern the subtle differences in the context. Because the story problem is ill-structured, meaning that there aren't necessarily one correct solution to the problem, successful demonstration of knowledge in this phase will require them to be able to accurately predict the outcomes after they manipulate the variables involved in the situation. If they are able to correctly predict the potential outcomes or consequences as a result of their decisions, they have successfully demonstrated that they are capable of fully understanding the important ramifications of these variables and how they will interact with the legal boundaries. On the other hand, if they incorrectly predict the outcomes or are not able to logically justify how the manipulation of the variables will impact the outcome of the case, then we will consider them yet under-equipped with the knowledge to handle situations presented in the case. After the assessment of their individual activity, we will also provide assessment for the collaborative community discussion. This is the part where students are engaged in a constructive social environment to exchange opinions and explain their understanding. While the first activity evaluates their level of familiarity with the facts and their ability to discern disparities in different circumstances, this group activity offers them the opportunity to articulate their thought processes and provide justifications for their decision-making processes. We will record their discussion and view the recording to identify whether they're using the proper keywords by referring to student privacy laws such as COPPA and FERPA that are related to the legal boundaries, and also how well they can explain their understanding of the relationships between privacy, ethics, and technologies to one another. In addition, we will pair up those who excelled in the first activity and those who did not perform well. We will then compare how they are selecting their language and framing the problems differently. Then, we will ask those who did not perform well the first time to explain their thinking processes again and see whether they have demonstrated improvements in their word choices and logical reasoning. Our learning experience is based on real-world scenarios that are made possible by the technological application called Securely that aims at protecting students' digital safety. In order to navigate through this app and to keep students' best interests in mind, teachers need to establish a firm understanding of the legal, technical, and ethical boundaries involved. We deep dived into the social media monitoring feature of Securely, by which teachers can gain access to students' social media activities on devices that have Securely installed. While this feature is helpful to prevent harming behaviors and cyberbullying, it opens up potential dangers if it's not properly used. With the continuation of the pandemic, hybrid and remote learning will become a norm rather than an anomaly. It has become increasingly important that teachers understand the aforementioned boundaries with the rising technologies and understand the importance of digital privacy. This technology offers practical context by which we can base our simulations on. Teachers can use our simulation, which is inspired by the Digital Pass program, to manipulate the various variables to see how they can influence the potential outcomes, therefore gaining deeper insights into the complexities of the matter. Aside from the cutting-edge new tech, conventional technologies such as video recording used in the collaborative discussion activity also provides us with the ability to record and evaluate teachers' thought processes and their understanding of the foundational knowledge.
It is our hope that this theoretical workshop provides meaningful, authentic learning to both technology coordinators and other high school faculty. We've considered a few fundamental dimensions: privacy laws, the ethics behind digital citizenship, and the capabilities of new instructional technologies, such as social media tracking. Building awareness helps everyone, regardless of technology background, to reflect upon data representations of not only their students, but their own lives.